Welcome to Focus Washington. I'm Chuck Conconi. This is Focus Washington, and my guest today is James Faeh, former Pentagon desk officer for Korea. James, thank you for being here.
Thanks so much, Chuck. It's great to be with you.
We're going to talk about your expertise, Korea. And what do we as Americans have to understand about what's going on right now to know what this all means?
Well, in terms of what the country operates like, just the very basic overview, this is one of the most closed off places in the entire world, and it operates functionally like a dictatorship. There's very little penetration of outside information into the country at all, and when they do provocative things, we tend to think foolishly that it's all about us, and it's really about us, about China, about South Korea, about Japan, about the whole region.
So it's much more complicated, but what is it that Kim Jong-un wants?
I think he wants security, like any other strongman. He specifically has cited the fates of others in different parts of the world who have given up their nuclear weapons, like Saddam Hussein or like Muammar Gaddafi, and he's seen that their fate does not work out so well.
Oh, so he thinks that was a mistake on their part.
He thinks that was a mistake. He wants to ensure the survival of his regime and of his legacy, just like his father and his grandfather, and stay in power. That's the most important thing.
But why is there so much tough talk on his part, and then also so much tough talk on President Trump, who is with this fire and fury? Isn't that just exacerbating the situation?
So we'll do that in two parts. The first part about the tough talk coming from Kim Jong-un. It's important to remember that all politics is local, even in Pyongyang. That tough talk is really for a domestic audience, to make them feel strong, to make them feel protected by Kim Jong-un. He's casting America as the great Satan, and it requires only him to be able to protect them from this imminent threat. And then on the part of President Trump, I think this rhetoric is extraordinarily problematic. Maybe that's a nicer way of saying it. It's dangerous and it's irresponsible, right, to have this much belligerence.
Well, it becomes frightening, but what options does Trump really have in this situation as compared to the options, say, that Obama had when you were at the Pentagon?
Sure. I think that in terms of actual policy decisions and execution, this is a little bit of a case of the same old wine, but in a new wine bottle. And the label is now in all caps, right, as he tweets out a lot of these things. But the rhetoric itself, just that big change, is a big problem because it sends a message that North Korea stops believing what our words are. If we threaten something and then it doesn't follow through. Our allies who need reassurance at this critical time, they're unsure as to whether or not they can trust the United States. And that has big implications if they're going to think about in the future expanding their own defensive capabilities and creating an arms race in Northeast Asia.
But what can the United States do in this situation? I mean, nobody wants to go to nuclear war.
No, I don't think anybody does. That includes our administration here, and that includes Kim Jong-un and his regime. They know that it would be the end of them. No doubt about it. I think we do have a lot of options, and I think it's a false choice to make people think that either you go to war or you have total capitulation to Kim Jong-un. There's an in-between where we can pursue multiple pathways at the same time. On the one hand, smart, dedicated global pressure campaign to cut off access to cash for the Kim regime and to stop their proliferation efforts, or at least slow them down, while at the same time engaging diplomatically, which has been proven to be, over the last 30 years, the only thing that can at least slow down the progress or ratchet down tensions.
Well, we keep talking about China helping us on this.
Yes.
China taking a leading role. Will they, or do they want to, or what will China do?
That's a great question, Chuck. And the honest truth is that nobody really knows. Part of the problem is that the United States and China have somewhat fundamentally different interests. Clearly, the Chinese, who are risk-averse by nature, are okay with this uncomfortable status quo because their larger fear, in the case of many analysts and in my view as well, is that they don't want total regime collapse. They don't want a refugee crisis on their border, and they don't want someday, a unification of the peninsula under joint South Korean American forces, and now all of a sudden they have American forces on their actual border.
Well, let's go to the supposition that they do fire a missile and they hit Guam or Japan or something. Then what does the United States do?
I think we would be, we will consult very closely with our South Korean allies, but we are treaty bound to defend South Korea and Japan against an actual, preliminary attack. Whether or not that would escalate to full nuclear war, it's hard to say. And that's why this problem is so important. That's why we need seasoned diplomatic leadership right now to ratchet down tensions, because there's a lot of uncertainty as to what would happen. People don't really understand the consequences of a full-scale war with a country like North Korea. They have an extraordinarily large army, and now they have a considerable stockpile of semi-capable nuclear weapons.
Yeah, what fascinates me, the Claris poll today, which surprised me, that said 50% of the public questioned would support the United States taking military action.
I think that's just a disconnect between what most Americans perceive as war in the modern sense and what it actually would be like. Most Americans think of war happening on CNN somewhere in the Middle East, where we fire in cruise missiles and there are relatively few consequences for us, aside from troops that are deployed there directly and, of course, consequences for our allies and for people in the region. This would hit Americans and could hit Americans directly. This could be, World War II levels of death and destruction. Aside from the nuclear threshold, even if it didn't go there, there's 8,000 pieces of artillery sitting on the border between North Korea and South Korea. And Seoul, a city of over 30 million people, is only about 40 miles away from the DMZ. So you could have a non-nuclear war and thousands could die within the first day.
As an expert on this, what do you think is likely to happen? Will the crisis subside? Is this just saber rattling again, or is war likely?
War is not likely. I want our American viewers to understand, right, that the actual physical threat, if you're living in Los Angeles or San Francisco or Alaska or Hawaii, is pretty low, but I don't think we should be okay with the degree to which it's risen from the Obama administration now to the Trump administration with this very bellicose rhetoric, ratcheting up tensions. The consequences of catastrophe are so high that even a small percent chance in the increase of actual full-scale, military conflict is so dire that we simply can't risk it. And I think what's likely to happen is that we will be able to eventually ratchet down tensions. I do. I'm optimistic, but a key problem is that we have too many positions open in the U.S. government right now. We need to fill those right away with experienced experts.
James, it's a frightening prospect all the way. But James Faeh, thank you for being here today.
Of course.
I'm Chuck Coney, and this has been Focus Washington.